9:17 on a Friday morning, Los Angeles police officers, they responded to what sounded like just a routine bank robbery. And it's LA, robberies happen.
Right.
Less than an hour later, though, they were pinned behind patrol cars, borrowing rifles from a local gun store, and fighting two heavily armored gunmen who had fired more than 1,100 rounds across a North Hollywood neighborhood. By the time it was all over, 11 police officers had been wounded, 12 civilians injured, more than 2,000 rounds had been fired. Millions of Americans had watched the whole thing unfold live on TV.
Damn right.
What started as a bank robbery had turned into one of the most intense gun battles in American law enforcement history, American history. The men responsible, they weren't military veterans, they weren't terrorists. Well, I guess they could be considered terrorists if you want to say.
Domestic.
They weren't even members of some organized insurgent group. They were just two career criminals who spent months building homemade body armor, illegally modifying rifles, stockpiling ammo, and preparing for the possibility of World War V with the police.
Right.
February 28, 1997, the war they wanted, well, it arrived.
Larry Eugene Phillips, Jr., 26 years old when the incident happened. He was born on September 20th, 1970 in L.A. Grew up in a family, didn't have much. Big influence on him was his daddy, Larry Phillips Sr. He was a man with a long history of petty crime and run-ins with the law. At one point, Phillips Sr. even escaped custody and spent 11 days hiding in a mountain cave in Colorado after breaking out of the Colorado State Penitentiary.
Jeez.
Stories like that left an impression on his son. He said, my daddy's an outlaw.
Half Cherokee and Choctaw.
Right. He came to admire his daddy's willingness to challenge authority and survive on his own terms. As old Phillips Jr. got older, he moved from minor crimes into much more serious territory. Eventually, he teamed up with Emil Matazzarano, and the two began carrying out the series of violent and armed robberies. Their methods, they were so aggressive that the law enforcement classified them as high-incident robberies. According to family members, Phillips Jr. wasn't driven by any large cause or any ideology. He just wanted money. But he also was chasing the rush that came with pulling off dangerous crimes. One relative said he was always after the thrill of a big score. His partner, Decipel Stefan Emilian Matazzarano, he was 30 years old. He was born 19th of July, 1966 in Timisoara, Romania. Later immigrated to the United States. Eventually, he's becoming a naturalized American citizen. Unlike Phillips Jr., Matazzarano had a formal education. He earned a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, and he tried making a living running a computer repair business. The problem is that the business never really succeeded. It left him buried in debt. Facing growing financial problems, Matazzarano, he turned to a bank robbery as a way to make money quickly.
Computer repair business, was it really taking off
In the 80s?
in the 1960s? 1996? Maybe like the height, not even the height of it, the start of it, maybe, right?
That's when they started the Geek Squad, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Best Buy. It wasn't driven by politics or any kind of ideological belief. No, instead, it was just straightforward. From a struggling legitimate business into a life of crime, fueled by a hope of solving his financial troubles through armed robbery. Together, he and Phillips, they would become one of the most notorious criminal partnerships in modern American history.
Yep. Both of those men, they showed a very calculated approach to crime. They didn't act on impulse or for any political or social cause. They just wanted money, and they carefully planned their robberies with detailed surveillance and preparation beforehand. What united them was a willingness to ignore the law if it meant making money. Over time, that mindset pushed them toward increasingly violent crimes. Oh, Larry, he showed signs of criminal behavior early in life. As a juvenile, he was involved in burglaries and auto thefts, establishing a pattern of property crimes that gradually became more sophisticated. By the time he reached adulthood, he had moved beyond simple theft and into fraud. By 91, he was arrested in Orange County for selling forged deeds of trust to a mortgage broker.
Oh, wow.
Which is a scheme that combined financial deception with outright theft and showed how his criminal activities were evolving. Emil, on the other hand, he took a different path. After immigrating from Romania in the 80s, he initially tried to build the thing, like we said. But his struggles, they led him into some various crimes, which included real estate fraud.
Oh, no.
Around 93, he met Phillips through their shared interest in working out at the gym. The two quickly formed a partnership. Before teaming up with Phillips, though, Emil's criminal record was relatively limited and lacked the long history of property crimes that old Larry had. Federal investigators later looked into the possibility of immigration-related fraud involved in Emil, but those inquiries never resulted in confirmed convictions. Criminal partnership escalated dramatically after 93 when, during a traffic stop in Glendale, the police, they discovered what investigators described as a bank robbery kit inside their car. The cache included weapons and various tools that suggested they were preparing for some serious criminal activity. what are you doing with those lockpicks?
Right.
What would you do? What would be a bank robbery kit?
Right.
Like a stethoscope to do the time?
Maybe.
The lock thing? Both men, they were charged with conspiracy to commit robbery, grand theft auto, and illegal possession of firearms. Rather than serving lengthy prison sentences, though, they accepted a measly little plea deal that resulted in 100 days in jail, followed by some probation, which is, geez, did we not learn our lesson still?
Right. Law enforcement, they believe the pair had already been involved in several major robberies. Investigators eventually nicknamed them high incident bandits because of the heavy firepower they brought to their crimes. Authorities, they suspected them of at least 2 armored car robberies, including June 14, 1995 attack on the Brinks truck in Winnetka area of L.A. During that ambush, guard Herman Cook murdered. Another guard wounded. Phillips and Mataserano, they escaped with an undisclosed amount of money and avoided capture.
How's it undisclosed?
Right. Those robberies showed how much their methods had evolved. They were no longer committing simple thefts or fraud schemes. They were using automatic weapons, conducting detailed planning, and employing escape tactics designed to frustrate investigators. Techniques they developed during those armed robberies would later appear again during the infamous 1997 confrontation. Investigators also linked recovered cash to other bank thefts that had never been publicly reported, suggesting the pair had successfully carried out additional robberies that generated substantial profits before the final showdown with the Popo.
See, and there's a thing right there. Substantial profits. They just robbed 100 million places, but no, we got to do it again. So now it's not even about the money no more. It's like, we just want to be assholes, right? By the time Larry and Emil were preparing for what would become the North Hollywood Shootout, it's been a considerable amount of time building an arsenal. Their primary weapons, they included several Norinco Type 56 rifles, which were Chinese-made versions of the AK-47, along with a Bushmaster XM-15 dissipator rifle. As convicted felons, they obviously couldn't legally buy or own them, so investigators determined the weapons reached them through black market channels, clearly. In many cases, the guns had originally been purchased legally at gun shows before being illegally resold to them. That's why your guys and you're the whole little people that want to ban guns. This is the way it would work all the time still, and this way it still works.
Right, idiots.
Those transactions, they allowed them to bypass federal background checks, clearly, either through straw purchasers or direct underground sales connected to criminal circles they had encountered through their earlier robberies.
Mm-hmm. Just like pot's legal in pretty much every state now, but you still got the dudes selling it on the streets.
Right. And my shit's better. Okay, but
it's kush.
Me and 6 other people smoked a pinner
for hours. Matter of fact, I'm still high. That was a week ago. That shit was laced with some rat poison, motherfucker.
Don't worry about my eye. It'll straighten up.
It'll show up.
Investigators also believe the pair acquired additional rifle parts and high-capacity mags. It's not a mag. High-capacity magazines through thefts and other criminal activity connected to the bank robberies and armored car robberies. Over time, they weren't just collecting weapons, they were systematically upgrading them.
Damn right.
Both men illegally modified several of their rifles. Well, you already got the legal guns. Might as well go all the whole 9 yards.
Fuck yeah, baby.
They converted the civilian legal semi-automatic firearms into fully automatic weapons.
Yeah.
Authorities believe they accomplished this through the use of drop-in auto sears or homemade conversion kits, which violated federal firearms laws.
It did.
They also equipped the rifles with large drum magazines capable of holding up to 100 rounds, along with box magazines ranging from 30 to 75 rounds.
Damn.
Jeez. In addition to the AK-style rifles and the Bushmaster, they possess a .308 caliber, Heckler, and a Koch Model 91 rifle, giving them a weapon with greater range and power.
Yeah. And you shoot like 300 yards.
The amount of ammo they accumulated was staggering, too. By the time of the robbery, they had stockpiled more than 3,300 rounds. Most of it was 7.26 by 39 millimeter ammo intended for the Norinco rifles.
Right.
Jeez. Included in that supply were military surplus armor Pearson rounds capable of penetrating soft body armor and some vehicle barriers.
Ooh-wee.
That sheer quantity of ammo went far beyond what investigators typically saw in bank robberies, and it suggested to them the pair, guess what, they were expecting some major confrontation with the Popos.
Right.
But why all that when they knew the cops didn't have what they had?
Because they know they can.
Well, because they knew the cops didn't have what they had.
Right, and they know they had at least a 98% chance of getting away.
Unfortunately for them, that 2% chance prevailed.
Their preparations didn't stop with weapons and ammo, no. The two also built their own body armor, working in workshops around the Glendale area. They fabricated
They just walked into random workshops. I could start welding.
They fabricated reinforced armor by welding or riveting steel trauma plates into custom-made vests and protective aprons. Metaserrano's armor reportedly weighed about 40 pounds. That's a lot. Phillips, his weighed about 45. The armor was designed to protect not just their torsos, but their groins and portions of their legs and arms.
To protect those vitals.
Everybody forgets their heads.
Yeah, because it's harder to shoot at a moving target.
All right. According to investigators, they used scavenged materials or purchased sheets of mild steel and tested the armor beforehand by firing handguns and commonly used police firearms at close range. The test convinced them that the armor would stop anything, almost anything. However, the protection is not perfect. There's areas around the extremities remain vulnerable, like the armpits and maybe the sides of the ribs or something, especially to high velocity rifle fire, too.
I mean, you have to be able to move, I guess.
Taken together, the weapons, ammo, the homemade armor, it showed just how much planning had gone into their preparations. Preparations and planning, I think.
Right.
This is not a robbery thrown together. No. Phillips and Emil, they spent months acquiring equipment, modifying weapons, building protective gear because they fully expected the possibility of a prolonged gun battle with responding law enforcement officers. Well, you are in Hollywood.
Well, by early 97, old Larry and Emil, they had settled on a target and a plan.
They chose his whole name. That's all
I know, like, why? They chose February 28, 1997 as the day they would rob the Bank of America branch in North Hollywood. Timing wasn't random. They deliberately scheduled the robbery for mid-morning, believing the bank would be holding larger amounts of cash from weekend deposits. It was the same kind of thinking that had guided some of their earlier robberies, where they focused on locations with easy accessible vaults and predictable staffing patterns. One weakness in their plan was that investigators never found evidence of backup escape vehicles or secondary routes.
Oh.
Everything depended on that one van and the assumption that they would be gone before police could even mount a serious response anyways. Looking back, it just showed how confident they were that the robbery would be over quickly. The plan went well beyond transportation, too. For weeks, the pair conducted surveillance on the bank, studying its layout, its vault access points, and the location of silent alarms. Emil's background in electronics likely helped them understand some of the bank's security measures and how they might work around them. They also monitored police activity throughout the North Hollywood area, paying particular attention to patrol patterns, and estimated how long it would take for officers to even respond to any crime.
All right.
Where their plan began to fall apart was in those calculations. Larry and Emil, they believed they would have somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes before specialized units such as SWAT team could arrive.
Maybe a couple patrol cars or something.
Right. That assumption turned out to be badly wrong. The LAPD, they responded much faster than they expected. Instead of slipping away with the money, the pair found themselves trapped in a running gun battle that lasted 44 minutes.
Damn. Wow. In the very end.
That's a long time.
Yeah, a very long time. In the very end, the preparations revealed a major flaw. They spent enormous amounts of time building weapons, stockpiling ammo, construction body armor. They prepared extensively for a fight. And what they didn't prepare for was getting away. Their planning emphasized firepower and survival during a confrontation, not escape. No. No. That imbalance would help turn what they expected to be another successful robbery into one of the most famous shootouts in American law enforcement history.
Yep.
February 28, 1997. A little after 9:15 a.m., Larry Phillips Jr., Emil Metaserrano, they pulled up to the Bank of America branch, 6600 Laurel Canyon Boulevard. White Chevrolet Celebrity. Oh, nice. By the time they arrived, both men were already wearing the homemade body armor.
Oh, just a way to be conspicuous, buds.
Each suit, 45 pounds, was designed to protect much of their bodies. 9:17 a.m., they stepped out of the car, retrieved the rifles, headed into the bank. The moment they entered, they made it clear this is not an ordinary robbery. Phillips Jr. shoved an ATM customer back inside the bank. Both men fired fully automatic bursts into the ceiling. Gunfire wasn't aimed at nobody. It was in the ceiling.
I would hope not.
It was meant to shock everybody. The tactic, of course, it worked. About 25 employees and customers, they were quickly forced to the floor. 2 gunmen took control. Despite the chaos, no one inside of the bank was injured during the opening moments.
Mm.
While Emil covered the lobby with his rifle, Phillips Jr., he started moving behind the teller counter, confronting branch manager Bertha Hart. He demanded access to the very vault that had all the money. And Hart, facing heavily armed robberies, handed over the necessary keys.
I'm getting killed for this shit.
It's over there, bud. The pair then moved to the bank's vault. One problem. The vault operated on a time delay.
Oh, you guessed it. Don't they all?
Even with the keys, they had to wait several minutes before it would open. And once it did, Phillips and Mataserano, they began stuffing duffel bags with cash. By the time they finished, they had gathered roughly $350,000. So you're telling me they already have cash in the vault that have the die packs on them?
Of course. For situations, because they're in bundles.
Right. Yeah, I guess it makes sense because they're on the Brinks truck just in case. Blah, blah. But even after robbery seemed to be going according to plan, these guys, they're already starting to unravel for some reason. Almost immediately after the gunman entered the bank, a teller managed to activate a silent alarm.
Oh, shit, that's what they're there for.
Authorities received the alert about 9:17 a.m., meaning that the Popo were already responding while the robbery was still underway. Then there's another problem. Several die packs hidden among the cash bundles activated while the robbers were handling them. The packs exploded, releasing dye and tear gas. Oh.
And tear gas. Oh, nice.
Cash that moments earlier had been a part of the haul was suddenly strained and stained and contaminated, and much of it not even useful. These setbacks had a direct impact.
I would fucking assume.
The man had reportedly hoped to walk away with at least $800,000, but the combination of the silent alarm and exploding die packs forced them to move faster.
Wow.
Instead of reaching their planned target, they were limited to a much smaller haul and just began preparing to leave the bank sooner than expected. Like, fuck, we just got to go.
Well, unfortunately for these guys, what neither of them knew that with police officers were already converging on the area.
Already standing outside.
Setting the stage for the gun battle that soon would make headlines around the world. The robbery, obviously still underway when the LAPD began receiving the calls. The silent alarm done its job. Shortly after 9:17 a.m., police officers started arriving at the scene. Among the first officers were James Zaboravan and Stuart Guy. Hey, Guy. As they pulled up, they spotted Larry and Emil coming out of the bank carrying rifles and wearing heavy body armor. Realizing they were facing heavily armed suspects, the officers took cover behind their patrol cars. And the situation exploded into violence. As soon as he stepped outside, Phillips opened fire with a fully automatic Norinco Type 56S. One rifle chambered in 7.62 by 39 millimeter, like we said. Instead of trying to escape quietly, he immediately launched what amounted to be a suppressive attack on the officers.
Uh-oh.
Rifle rounds tore across the parking lot, forcing police to keep their heads down and trapping them behind their cars. The officers, they tried to fire back with what little weapons they had. Most of them at the time carried Beretta 92 FS 9 millimeters, and some had some 12 gauge loaded with buckshot, but what's that going to do?
Right.
Under normal circumstances, those weapons would have been more than adequate for guys that didn't have fucking 45 pounds of armor on. But these were far from normal circumstances. The rounds striking Phillips and Mataserano, they weren't even having the desired effect. Their homemade armor, built from the layers of Kevlar and steel trauma plates, they absorbed a bunch of the incoming fire. Officer Zabaravan, he managed to hit Phillips with shotgun blasts, but the gunman kept fighting as if nothing happened. Very quickly, the officers realized they were badly outgunned. The guys, they were firing rifle rounds capable of punching through patrol cars, while the officers were largely armed with shotguns and handguns. Patrol vehicles were shredded by incoming gunfire. Windows exploded, and metal panels were punched through as rounds struck from multiple directions.
Insane.
During the exchange, Officer Zabaravan, he was wounded in the back and the hip. Officer Wayne Krulak, he was struck in the ankle. Even so, the officers continued returning fire while trying to keep the gunmen contained at least. We can't have these monsters just rolling around the street in this shit.
Right. Holy shit.
Fuck.
Damn, no rifles available that could reliably penetrate the... There's no rifles available that could penetrate the suspect's armor. The first responding officer was forced to pull back to more defensible positions. Some took cover behind a nearby van. Others moved behind an adjacent medical building. From there, they continued firing when opportunities presented themselves, while waiting for additional units, and also heavier weapons to arrive. No officers killed during the opening phase of the gun battle, but the encounter immediately exposed the problem. The patrol officers on scene were facing two heavily armed men with automatic rifles. And the standard equipment carried by the LAPD simply was designed for not that kind of a fight, just for a little, hey buddy, a little 9 millimeters. You gotta be 5 feet in front of me so I can kill you while your back's away from me.
Accurately, but yeah.
I put my knee on your neck so you can't breathe.
Well, that was Minneapolis.
I don't know. The first few minutes of the shootout made it painfully clear that it was no longer just a bank robbery. It had become a running battle between police and two suspects who had come prepared for a war. There we go. The gunfire spread all the way across Laurel Canyon Boulevard. Parking lots, surrounding buildings, Although Phillips Jr. and Matto Serrano, they were primarily aiming at the popos. Civilians in the area were also caught in the middle of an active firefight. Shoppers, drivers, people in nearby businesses, they found themselves scrambling for safety as bullets flew through the neighborhood. These opening shots marked the beginning of what would become 44 minutes of hell.
As the situation developed, the two gunmen began moving in different directions. Old Larry headed north, while old Matto Serrano headed south. Larry went north. Emil, he moved south, forcing officers to divide their attention and creating multiple active threats across the area.
Right.
Separation wasn't part of a carefully coordinated battlefield maneuver as much as it was just a response to the rapidly changing situation around them.
Mm-hmm.
But it did have the effect of making the confrontation even more difficult for the popos.
44 minutes and no copper? No copter? No chopper?
Oh, well, there'll be newscopters.
No.
Around 9:31, the gunmen moved into the bank's north parking lot. There, they used parked vehicles and portions of the bank's exterior walls as temporary cover while exchanging fire. At one point, Phillips returned to their car and retrieved additional weapons and equipment. From behind cover, he continued firing bursts across the parking lot and surrounding streets, keeping officers pinned. The battle continued to spread outward. By about 9:42, Emil, he had climbed into the heavily damaged Chevrolet sedan and began driving it forward while Larry moved alongside on foot. Together, they continued pouring rifle fire toward police positions. The volume of gunfire repeatedly halted officers attempted to advance, and it forced civilians to flee the area whenever possible.
It's also, too, you really don't want to jump in that car and go, because now you're in a chase and your advantage that you had is gone.
Right. As minutes passed, though, the distance between the two robbers grew larger and larger. By approximately 9:53, Phillips, he had broken away and moved east along Archwood. He eventually took cover behind a parked big rig trailer located roughly a dozen yards from the parking lot. From that position, he continued engaging officers who were trying to close in on him. Meanwhile, old Emil, he continued east in the Chevy. At times, the two men were separated by more than 500 feet.
Fine.
The growing distance made coordination increasingly difficult, but also created a new challenge for the popos. Instead of focusing on a single position, now they have two heavily armed guys that are at completely different parts of the scene. That separation marked a turning point in the shootout, too. From that moment on, Larry and Emil, they were essentially fighting their own battles, each using vehicles, buildings, and other features of the urban landscape and other features of the neighborhood to stay alive and keep officers at bay as the confrontation stretched deeper into the neighborhood.
Damn you, Scuba Steve. Wow, the shootout continued. Larry and Emil, they kept up an astonishing volume of fire. And by the time the confrontation was over, investigators estimated the pair had roughly 1,100 rounds fired from the suspects. Even as weapons malfunctions and police pressure increased, they continued putting rounds downrange at a pace rarely seen in a domestic law enforcement encounter. Their rifle fire remained dangerous throughout the battle. Officers were wounded at distances exceeding 100 yards,
Jeez.
showing just how much reach and power the robbers still had. Every attempt by the police to move forward had to be weighed against the risk of walking into another burst of rifles. Rather than staying in one place, Phillips and Emil, they constantly shifted positions. They moved between whatever cover they could find. Trailers, damaged vehicles, patrol cars, and the remains of their own sedan. Each new position allowed them to continue firing while other officers reassessed their positions and were like, okay, what are we going to do now?
And where's the threat coming from
Jeez,
now?
oh, Pete. Most of their gunfire was directed toward police officers, not civilians, however.
Yeah, we know.
Right. What made this phase of the shootout so difficult for the Popo was that the gunmen largely controlled the pace.
You don't want to have the gunmen controlling the pace.
Officers were constantly reacting to the robbers' movements rather than dictating their own. Every time the policemen tried to gain ground, another burst of rifle fire would stop the advance and force them back into cover.
Jeez.
For much of the confrontation, the two men turned ordinary residential streets and parking lots into an active battlefield. The combination of heavy body armor, automatic rifles, large ammo reserves, and constant movement allowed them to keep officers at bay. What had started as a bank robbery had fully evolved into a prolonged running gun battle, one that overwhelmed the capabilities of the first responding patrol units and forced the LAPD to adapt on the fly as the situation continued to unfold. And they did just that. They adapted on the fly.
They tried. The standard patrol weapons carried by most officers simply weren't designed to stop heavily armored suspects armed with automatic rifles. Officers, they were being forced to take cover while the suspects continued moving and shooting despite absorbing multiple hits. Patrol cars that normally provided decent protection, they were being punched through by rifle rounds. Windows, they were shattered, doors were riddled with holes, and pieces of concrete and metal were sent flying as bullets struck buildings and vehicles throughout the area. The Challenge weren't limited to weapons either. As more and more officers responded, coordination became increasingly difficult.
Right.
Eventually, more than 300 officers from multiple agencies were involved in the response. Communication problems complicated the effort. Radio issues plagued officers throughout the incident. The command post had to be relocated 4 different times as the situation shifted and the gunfire spread across the neighborhood. Jeez. The environment itself worked against the police. Streets that were packed with civilian vehicles, buildings, walls, and parked cars created countless blind spots.
I'm sorry.
Rifle rounds ricocheted off concrete and metal surfaces, making any movement dangerous, even for officers who weren't directly in the line of fire. Something could just like...
Right. Sorry that there's buildings, walls, and parked cars in the middle of a city.
Attempts to flank the gunmen were limited too, because advancing often meant exposing officers to sustained rifle fire. To stay in the fight, officers, they began improvising what any good person would do in time of trouble.
Right. Wow. Some of those, they ripped the doors off patrol cars. They used them as makeshift ballistic shields.
Yeah, but how would that work if the bullets were going through them?
Right. Others, they hunkered down behind vehicles, trees, walls, anything that could stop a bullet. One of the most famous examples of improvisation came when officers obtained high-powered rifles and ammo from a nearby gunshot. They gave them weapons that could better match the robbers' firepower and potentially penetrate their armor. Even with those adjustments, the costs mounted. At the end of the shootout, 11 officers been wounded. Among them, Officer James Zaboravan, who suffered multiple gunshot wounds yet continued participating in the response despite his injuries. That motherfucker's getting a Purple Heart if he was in a war.
I was just saying, I think they have like a...
That's a Medal of Freedom or some shit.
Well,
Whatever
the police agency has their own medal.
For the officers on the ground, the fight became a test of endurance. They were pinned down, outgunned, dealing with communication problems. Yet they continued engaging the suspects while waiting for better equipped units and additional resources to arrive. The longer the gun battle lasted, the more exposed the gap between what patrol officers were carrying in 1997 and the level of firepower they suddenly found themselves facing on the streets of North Hollywood. By the time the shootout had stretched past the 40-minute mark, the balance of the battle was finally beginning to shift. What had started as a fight between heavily armed robbers and patrol officers now was drawing in the LAPD's specialized units. These guys had the high-powered rifles. Around 9:42 a.m., SWAT, Metropolitan Division, personnel.
Why did it take 40 minutes?
Right. By 9:42 a.m., SWAT and Metropolitan Division personnel began arriving in force. They came equipped with MP5 machine guns, shotguns, unlimited number of rifles. Working alongside patrol officers already on scene, these units focused on containing the gunmen, rescuing wounded officers and also civilians that just happened. What's going on? Oh shit, they're doing it. And slowly tightening the perimeter. Armored vehicles were brought in to move personnel through areas that had become too dangerous to cross on foot. Meanwhile, officers used suppressive fire to keep the suspects pinned down and prevent them from maneuvering freely throughout the neighborhood. And by this point, old Larry Phillips Jr. had already been hit numerous times. Despite wearing body armor, he had suffered at least 10 gunshot wounds during the battle. Wow.
Jeez.
Even so, he continued advancing, retreating, and exchanging fire with the Popo. Eventually, Phillips made his way east along Archwood Street. He attempted to reach a semi-truck that could provide cover, but the situation was rapidly deteriorating around him. At a critical moment, his primary rifle jammed. With officers closing in and his options disappearing, Phillips reached the end of his fight. Approximately 9:53 a.m., he used his Beretta 92 FS handgun to take his own life.
Shot himself right through the mouth.
While Phillips' part was done, old Mataserano, he was still on the move. After briefly driving the getaway vehicle, Mataserano abandoned it, continued east on foot. He had already been wounded, and portions of his body armor had been damaged, leaving him increasingly vulnerable. As he tried to escape, he moved roughly a third of a mile through the neighborhood and eventually attempted to carjack a pickup truck. Well, that effort failed, and SWAT officers, they closed in, baby.
Beginning around 9:58, Mataserano, he became involved in a final exchange of gunfire that lasted about 6 more minutes.
That's still a long time. Holy
Officers
shit.
concentrated their fire on areas of his body that were no longer fully protected by armor, particularly his legs and other exposed sections. During the engagement, officers fired 29 rounds, primarily from 45 ACP handguns. Those wounds finally brought him down. Approximately 10:01 a.m., Mataserano, he was collapsed in the street. He did later die from hemorrhage shock caused by those wounds.
I bet.
But that's not the end of that, because with his death, the shootout came to an end.
Oh, my.
But even after that, the controversy surrounding the incident wasn't over.
Why?
After being wounded during the final exchange of gunfire, Matasaurano remained alive for a period of time while officers secured the area and searched for any additional suspects. Because the cops couldn't initially believed there could still be more, medical personnel were not immediately allowed into the scene.
I mean, right, with all that gunfire, you gotta think there's more than 2 fucking people. Holy shit.
As a result, Matasaurano, he remained where he had fallen for an extended period before receiving medical attention.
That's fucked up.
He eventually died from blood loss caused by the gunshot wounds and severed major arteries in his legs.
Damn.
The delay became the subject of intense public debate in the months and years that followed.
Oh, jeez.
Supporters of the officers argued that the scene was still considered extremely dangerous, and the police could not safely allow paramedics into an area where they believed additional armed suspects might still be present. Critics, they argued that medical aid should have been provided sooner once Matasaurano was incapacitated.
Exactly.
Controversy ultimately led to a wrongful death lawsuit filed by Matasaurano's family against the city of L.A. The case drew significant attention because it raised questions about the balance between officer safety and provided medical treatment to wounded suspects during active tactical situations.
You got to.
In the end, the city prevailed in court because, of course, no officers were found legally responsible for Matasaurano's death.
Of course.
Even so, the debate remains one of the most discussed aspects of the aftermath and continues to be examined whenever the North Hollywood incident is revisited.
I mean,
right now.
He's a piece of shit, but they should at least try to keep him alive because you do want to put the motherfucker through court.
Right, well.
They want that. They want that fucking conviction. No one's ever happy when they die. Then it's all for naught. What kind of punishment they get? Nothing.
Dead?
Yeah. Nah. We had begun shortly after 9:17 a.m. as a bank robbery had evolved into a 44-minute gun battle involving hundreds of officers. Automatic rifle fire across city streets, armored suspects, wounded police officers, terrified civilians taking cover throughout the neighborhood. And by the end, both robbers were dead, but the confrontation had exposed major weaknesses in the police. Lessons that would lead to significant changes in law enforcement tactics throughout the whole country. When the shooting finally stopped on February 28, 1997, the casualty numbers were remarkable, considering the sheer amount of gunfire that had been exchanged across a busy L.A. neighborhood. 11 LAPD officers wounded. Most of the injuries involved gunshot wounds to the arms, legs, and other extremities, along with wounds caused by bullet fragments and flying debris. We got shrapnel. Despite spending 44 minutes under sustained fire from heavy armed suspects, no LAPD officers were murdered.
Look at that.
Civilians are also caught in chaos. 12 people suffered injuries, including gunshot wounds, shrapnel-related injuries. Fortunately, all of those injuries were classified as non-life-threatening, and every civilian survived. Given that the firefight unfolded around businesses, parking lots, streets, passing traffic, the absence of civilian fatalities was considered extraordinary.
Yeah.
The 2 men responsible, they didn't survive, as we know. Larry Phillips Jr. was hit by approximately 12 rounds. Even after suffering those wounds, he continued fighting until his rifle malfunctioned, like we said. Facing officers who were closing in, he took his own life. As we said, Matasaurano survived longer, and he continued attempting to escape after Phillips died. During the final stages of the shootout, officers struck him with 29 rounds.
Jeez.
According to the autopsy, several of those wounds hit his thighs and severed major arteries. He was dying regardless. The resultant blood loss proved fatal, and Emil Matasaurano ultimately died from bleeding out.
From exsanguination.
In the end, the North Hollywood Shootout left 23 people injured, 11 officers, 12 civilians. Both robbers murdered, but no officers or civilians lost their lives. Yes. Considering that more than 1,100 rounds had been fired by the suspects alone, that the battle lasted 44 minutes across a populated urban area, many investigators and observers later viewed the lack of additional fatalities as one of the most remarkable aspects of the entire incident. The reason the North Hollywood Shootout lasted as long as it did comes down to 2 things. Obviously, the weapons from the robbers they brought with them and the armor they wore.
Old Phillips, he carried a Norinco Type 56S rifle chambered in 7.26 by 39 millimeter. Had been illegally converted to fire fully automatic. He also had a Heckler and Koch model 91 chambered in 308 Winchester.
Woo!
To increase that capacity, the standard 20-round magazines had been welded together into extended magazines, allowing him to stay in the fight longer without needing to reload. Matasaurano, on the other hand, he was armed with a Norinco Type 56 S1 underfolder rifle and a Norinco Type 56 Sporter.
Nice.
Like Phillips's weapons, both of them had been modified for fully automatic. He fed them with Romanian 75-round drum magazines, giving them the ability to fire long bursts before needing to reload.
He said,
The pair, they also had access to Bushmaster XM15E2S dissipator chambered in 5.56 millimeter. That rifle had also been converted to fully automatic and was equipped with a 100-round Beta C mag drum.
Son of a bitch.
Jeez. Between all their rifles, like I said, they fired more than 1,100 shots. That's crazy. Although both men both carried 9 millimeters, Phillips is the only one to have been known to use his pistol during the gun battle, and that was primarily on himself.
Right.
And then there was the armor, which absorbed repeated hits from police handguns and shotguns throughout the shootout. Officers often watch rounds strike the suspects without producing an immediate effect. As a result, police were forced to aim for exposed areas such as the arms and legs, or wait for better equipped units to arrive with rifles capable of defeating the armor.
Right.
That combo of automatic rifles, large capacity magazines, thousands of rounds of ammo, and extensive body armor, well, it gave them both significant advantage during the early stages of the gun battle. Even as they accumulated wounds, the protection and firepower allowed them to stay in the fight far longer than anyone had anticipated.
Damn.
As we know, on the other side, LAPD, they were only armed with the Beretta 92 FS 9mm semi-automatic pistols.
Nothing.
Their primary long guns were Remington 870 12-gauge shotguns.
Nothing.
A limited number of officers carried Smith & Wesson model 1076 pistols, chambered in 10mm. But those weapons were not common among regular patrol units. Those are the special guys.
Yeah.
Rifles such as AR-15 variants were generally reserved for SWAT and specialized teams.
Yep.
And they weren't authorized for routine patrol carry.
Not yet.
Under normal circumstances, that equipment was considered sufficient for most things. And the North Hollywood Shootout, that was anything but normal.
You ain't fucking kidding.
The thing about it, the officers' handguns, they were only effective about typically around 50 yards or less. While the suspects, they were firing rifle rounds capable of reaching much farther.
Right, and you're pushing it with 50 yards with 9mm.
And they had penetrating barriers that patrol officers relied on protection. As the shootout continued, officers on their own, without the other 1,100 fired by the guys, these officers fired 550 rounds. Problem was a lack of courage or a willingness to engage for that 44 minutes. Problem was that officers just couldn't deliver the kind of decisive firepower needed to stop heavily armed suspects from protected positions or at longer ranges.
Right. Wow. Department policy at the time made the situation even more difficult. Patrol officers were not allowed to keep rifles in their vehicles. If officers needed rifle caliber weapons, they generally had to wait for specialized units. That meant the first responders arrived with equipment designed for conventional police work rather than prolonged battles against suspected armies. As the firefight intensified, officers began looking for solutions wherever they could find. One of the most remarkable moments of the shootout came when officers realized that they simply didn't have enough firepower. Just a short distance away was B&B Sales. It was a local gun shop. As the battle continued, officers went to the store seeking rifles that could match the range and power of the weapons being used by the suspects. Store owner Bob Bain, nice.
B&B?
He didn't hesitate. He opened his inventory to the officers and said, "Take what you need, boys." They got A-15 style rifles.
He was like, say less.
Right, along with ammo. The officers signed for the weapons and immediately carried them into the fight. After the shootout ended, the rifles were returned and paperwork was completed.
Good for them.
Dude, I bet you that dude sold those fucking rifles for thousands of dollars.
Right, these were used in the actual gun battle.
These were used to kill Billy the Kid. The image of the police officers running into the neighborhood gun store to obtain rifles in the middle of an active gun battle quickly became one of the defining stories of North Hollywood Shootout. More than anything else, it highlighted the reality facing patrol officers that morning. They weren't just outnumbered or caught off guard. No, they were fighting heavily armored suspects armed with rifles, while many of them just had little pew-pews.
Right.
In the years that followed the lessons of North Hollywood, it led to major changes across the whole country. Patrol rifles became increasingly common in police vehicles. Active shooter training expanded. Departments across the country reevaluated how officers should respond to heavily armed suspects. North Hollywood Shootout didn't just expose a gap in equipment. It fundamentally changed how many police agencies prepared for high-risk incidents in the future. And once the shooting ended at approximately 10:01 a.m. on the 28th of February, 1997, the focus shifted from surviving the gun battle to figuring out exactly what the fuck
just happened here.
Right. Are you fucking kidding me? Detectives from the LAPD Robbery Homicide Division, they immediately began processing what the hell had just happened there. And one of the largest crime scenes in the city's history. How are we going to go through this? There's going to be shells everywhere, casings, shrapnel. Oh, my goodness.
We don't even have enough evidence markers.
Jeez, OP. Investigators worked across multiple locations, including the Bank of America branch at Laurel Canyon Boulevard and Victory Boulevard and the surrounding streets where the running gun battle had unfolded. evidence everywhere. Detectives, they recovered spent shell casings, pieces of armor, damaged weapons, cash scattered all throughout the area. Roughly $300,000 was taken during the robbery. The investigation continued throughout that very day and into that night. 1:55 p.m. Investigators collected gunshot residue samples from Larry Phillips Jr.'s hands. Autopsies later documented the numerous gunshot wounds suffered by both. The coroner's office remained on scene for hours. The bodies were not removed until about 3 a.m. Wow. And then they did fingerprinting, photography, and extensive scene documentation was completed before they even removed the bodies. Oh, my.
At the same time, LAPD detectives and FBI investigators, they began executing searches connected to the suspect.
Holy shit. So them bodies is laid there on the road from 10 a.m. to 3 a.m.?
Yeah.
Wow.
Got to.
That bank was shut down all day.
Well, clearly. I don't think they were having people come in and out after that. I would imagine the whole scene, like a mile perimeter, would have been
holy shit
shut off, right?
Damn.
The searches, they uncovered additional ammunition, unassembled firearms, and more evidence of the pair's criminal activities. Authorities also seized more than $20,000 in cash from accounts and residences linked to Phillips and Mataserano.
Oh, okay.
As investigators dug deeper, they strengthened connections between the two men and several earlier armored car robberies that had remained unsolved.
I wonder how much money they had in like places that were hid.
Probably a lot.
I mean, they did all these robberies. They probably had over 100,000 each somewhere.
Probably more than that.
Right.
That's why I don't know, why are you doing this?
Right. This doesn't make no sense.
While detectives worked the crime scene, LAPD Chief Willie Williams.
Oh, nice.
William Williams.
Oh, Bill.
Bill. He addressed the public at a 2 p.m. press conference. He praised the actions of the officers who had fought through what he described as a mobile and fluid situation. Even after the shooting had ended, investigators were still sorting through confusion created during the battle.
Right.
One of the biggest problems involved communications. Around 9:21 a.m., garbled radio transmissions had led some officers to believe there were more than two suspects. Because of that confusion, police spent much of the incident operating under the assumption that additional gunmen might still be at large.
Didn't they talk anybody in the bank?
Apparently not. Wow.
Yeah, that's right.
It was not until approximately 10:30 a.m. that authorities fully clarified the suspect count. The early reviews also exposed several operational problems, communication breakdowns, complicated coordination, concerns about active threats led the LAFD, the fire department, to pull ambulances back from the area at approximately 10:08 a.m. That's when old Mataserano didn't get his medical attention.
Right. Jeez.
He laid there and didn't die until 11:10.
Damn.
Wow. Despite the scrutiny that followed such a high-profile event, investigators found no evidence of officer misconduct. Instead, much of the attention focused on the actions of officers who continued fighting despite being outgunned for much of the confrontation.
Yeah.
The public, they followed the entire event almost as it happened.
Right. Shit was live.
TV news helicopters hovered overhead throughout the shootout, broadcasted live images of the gunmen moving through the streets and exchanging fire with the police. Crazy. Viewers across the country watched as bank robbery transformed into a prolonged urban gun battle. By the time of the shooting, altogether between the cops and the suspects, more than 2,000 rounds had been fired by both sides. More than 2,000 rounds had been fired, leaving the streets covered with shell casings and damaged vehicles.
Even after the final shots were fired, the work was far from over. Detectives had to conduct witness interviews, beginning with bank employees at about 1:30 p.m. By 2 o'clock p.m., 15 additional detectives had been assigned to assist with investigation. The crime scene itself remained active for hours. Authorities did not officially secure and close the scene until about 11:30 p.m., and the body still lay there until 3 a.m.
Right.
Wow, more than 13 hours after the gun battle. For investigators, North Hollywood Shootout wasn't just a robbery gone wrong. It became a massive criminal investigation, a case study in police response, an event that would influence law enforcement tactics and equipment for years to come. I guess a kind of good thing that it happened because it showed the flaws in police enforcement, right?
Gotta be prepared.
Right? You usually don't know when shit don't work until it don't work. You're like, oh, we need...
Don't want that to happen again.
Right. North Hollywood Shootout didn't just change the lives of people. No, it changed policing across L.A. and across the United States. One of the biggest lessons from the 28th of February 1997, within a month of the shootout, the L.A. Police Department authorized purchase of AR-15 semi-automatic rifles for patrol use. Instead of waiting for SWAT to arrive with rifle caliber weapons, officers would now have access to rifles stored in patrol vehicles, most likely their trunk. The first deployments focused on areas considered most likely to face high-risk incidents like this bank. But the program quickly expanded throughout the department and the United States of America.
The LAPD also upgraded its body armor requirements. Officers were already wearing soft body armor vests, but the shootout demonstrated that soft armor alone had limitations when facing rifle fire.
Right.
New standards called for an additional hard armor plates capable of stopping common rifle rounds, including the types fired by the AK-style rifles used by the Perps. The impact of the shootout extended well beyond LA, too.
Yeah.
In all of California, the LA and the LA city councilman, Mike Fewer, he helped push legislation that provided grant funding to law enforcement agencies seeking to purchase patrol rifles and upgraded protective equipment.
Look at that. That was 1997. If that would have happened within the last 5 years, that would actually reduce the amount of weapons that the police could carry. They were
like, this dude, they're running around with 9mm. That's too powerful.
There'd be fucking statues of Phillips Jr. and Mediano, whatever the fuck his name is.
Well, if you want to get technical, they're not statues, but at the LAPD museum, there are recreations of these guys in their museum thing.
That's fucked up.
It's a hell of a scene.
Fucking wax figures and shit.
Basically, yeah.
Wow.
The funding for those accelerated the speed of patrol rifle programs throughout the state, allowing departments that previously relied almost entirely on handguns and shotguns. Well, now they got a little bit more firepower. Mm. By 98, many major police departments across the whole country had begun implementing similar programs. AR-15 style rifles and comparable patrol weapons became increasingly common, giving officers access to equipment that could better match heavily armed suspects wearing body armor or carrying high-capacity firearms.
Right.
Training, that changed as well.
I fucking hope so. Before the North Hollywood Shootout, many departments still viewed heavily armed confrontations as situations that should largely be contained until specialized units arrived. The shootout challenged that thing, and they're like,
it took 40 minutes.
Right. Officers saw firsthand how much damage could occur while waiting. As a result, training programs, they began placing greater emphasis on active shooter response. Officers are taught to move toward threats more quickly, use cover more effectively, coordinate rifle fire, operate as small teams capable of confronting dangerous suspects before SWAT arrived. LAPD incorporated many of these lessons into annual training, including instruction on tactical movement, use of cover, and maintaining body armor and equipment. Nationally, the shootout became one of the most talked about events that helped shape the modern active shooter response that emerged before the Columbine high school attack in 1999. The emphasis, shifted toward rapid intervention by patrol officers rather than relying exclusively on perimeter containment and waiting for specialized units. Concepts such as quick reaction times and teams that gained broader acceptance as agency recognized the importance of immediate action during high threat incidents. Like, we can't just sit around and wait for these motherfuckers. Right. We gotta get in. The changes, they proved to be significant. In later confrontations involving suspects armed with rifles, officers often had access to equivalent firepower from the beginning. This reduced response times, improved officer safety, and helped shorten many incidents before they could develop into prolonged gun battles. No more 44 fucking minutes, right. 2,000 fucking rounds sprayed across the whole fucking city.
In many ways, the lasting legacy of the shootout wasn't the robbery itself. It was the realization that modern patrol officers might someday face threats that looked more like a battlefield than a traditional crime scene. The lessons learned that day reshaped police equipment, training, and tactics for a generation and beyond. In the end, Larry Phillips Jr. and Emil Matasareanu, they got exactly what they had spent months preparing for. They expected a confrontation with the police. They built custom body armor for it. They converted rifles to full automatic fire for it. They stockpiled 1,000 rounds of ammo for it. Every major decision they made leading up to February 28, 97 was based on the belief that if things gone wrong, we're going to fight our way out of this bitch.
They almost did.
What they never figured out was how to survive.
Right.
44 minutes after the first shots were fired, both men dead. The money was recovered. The robbery had failed. A quiet Los Angeles neighborhood had become the scene of one of the most extraordinary gun battles in modern American history. The story didn't end when the shooting stopped. The lessons learned that day changed police equipment, training tactics, like we said, and shooter response police's policies all across the country. More than 25 years later, the images remain unforgettable.
They're all over the internet.
Patrol cars riddled with bullets, officers taking cover behind anything they could, news helicopters broadcasting the whole thing live, two gunmen walking through the streets of North Hollywood as if they were fighting a battle instead of committing a bank robbery. For 44 minutes, the city watched the robbery turn into a war zone, and the effects of that day are still being felt by law enforcement agencies all across the world. probably at this point, right?
Right, I would say so.
Crazy.
There you had it. 2 fucking morons thinking they had the perfect crime, the crime of the century, the unstoppable force they thought they were. Stopped dead in their tracks.
I mean,
they could have got away.
They were. Why didn't they just get in the damn car and
just go?
Take off, dude? Idiots. Well,
Just
they
go.
Clearly, they wanted some fucking gunfight, and they got it. They got their asses moited. Well, not, is it murder? It's not murder.
No. They did.
They just did.
They did.
They did. That's going to do it for us. North Hollywood Shootout.
Yeah, that was a rough one, guys.
Yeah. What are you going to do? And we'll see you next week for more Outlaws, Gunslingers, or the month of Michigan.